joining. We'll just take a few minutes to allow everyone to join. As we allow everyone to join, I would like to ask participants, those that are joining, just type a few words. Who are you and where you're from? And then all of us will be reading your charts. And then soon after everyone else is on the line, we'll get started with the webinar. Panelists, I also see you. I welcome you. And I'm looking forward to introduce you in a moment. Thank you. Thank you once again for joining us. My name is Soti Niziwa, and I'll be your host today. I see a lot of people have joined in. Those who are joining, keep on typing your name and where you're from so that we know each other. And we'll keep on checking the chats. My colleagues are active, and the conversation will go on. So I would like to especially welcome you to this webinar, which is organized by ourselves from Single Family Foundation, the Social Impact Incubator, our partners, Roots Change, and we have our colleague from the Ministry of Health, specifically from Balaka, all of them who have exciting experience to share with all of us. But just to start the conversation, I will open it up by really just giving you a background of what you also received in your emails. So at Single Family Foundation, we launched the 2016, in 2016, we launched the Single Family Foundation Social Impact Incubator in Malawi. And our aim was really to create an environment for social entrepreneurs to amplify and grow their impact. So we're providing tools, building networks, and connect them to investment and as well as solution. So in that same period, around 2019 to 2020, we partnered with Root Change, like I said earlier, to pilot one ecosystem mapping initiative, which aimed to understand the role that the Single Family Foundation and the Social Impact Incubator plays in Malawi. So we wanted really to have an understanding on network behaviors of the current people we work with. So we have over 90 organizations that we work with in Malawi and across Africa. There's more. So we wanted to have that privilege to inform strategies for how we strengthen the larger ecosystem. Well, this is going on well with us. As of 2021, as I'm speaking now, we are proud to say that we have more than 570 organizations on the map and 870 relationships that are being visualized on the map. Now, that is not a small feat. Like we are celebrating that, we are constantly talking about it, and we love talking about it. But what does it really mean? So we want to sit down with you today and just share what is happening in that sector. We'll take opportunity to discuss what network mapping is, and also go deep by learning what others are doing in the sector. That's why we have a diverse panel. And not to preempt what they're going to say, I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce the panelists. Myself, Sotin Iziwa, like I said, I'm a social enthusiast working with the Single Family Foundation. My role is in growth and community engagement. And currently I'm focusing on really working with this amazing tool with Pando, a network mapping tool, which we're going to talk about in this chat. To the stage, as panelists, I would like to introduce you, Maria. I'll hand it over to Maria, who's going to tell us more what our institution is, what she does, and where she's coming from. And lastly, she'll tell us her favorite animal. Over to you, Maria.
Thanks, Sotin, for that introduction. I think I wear several hats, and so I'll just focus on the work that I've been doing in the social impact community. I come from a private sector background, 16 years in leadership development and strategy, and made my way into consulting, and that's when I encountered really wonderful entrepreneurs, social innovators in the social impact space within Malawi, where I've been working for the past 6 years. And really my role has been to facilitate building of systems and structures to create really robust organizations that can act as a vehicle to deliver impact in various spheres across the impact ecosystem, not just in Malawi, but across our region in Southeast Africa. So I'm really excited to be here and just excited to be able to share what some of the experiences have been working with particularly early stage, locally led, grassroots social impact actors in Malawi, what that ecosystem looks like, what we're seeing in terms of touch points and interactions, where are the resource hubs, where are the opportunities to really create a more seamless, coordinated, and responsive social impact community, particularly in the times that we're living in. Favorite animals, I think water animals for me. So I would say fish, yes.
Okay, we see whether she likes to eat the fish or keep a spade. That is a story for another day. Now I welcome Godfrey Magowera, who is going to introduce himself as well. Thank you. Godfrey. You're on mute, Godfrey.
Thank you very much. I think you can hear me.
Yes, perfectly.
All right. I'm Godfrey Magowera, Agriculture Extension Development Officer in the Ministry of Agriculture, Extension Department. And I'm the Secretary for Chantunya and Insamara Area Stakeholder Panel, which are the community DICE agriculture extension platforms. So my role is to provide agriculture extension services to farmers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Godfrey. What is your favorite animal?
Chicken. That's my favorite, chicken.
Okay, now everyone is saying their favorite relish. So I will say my favorite animal last. Next to the panel introduction is Alexis Banks. Over to you, Alexis.
Sure. Thanks, Sotin. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. My name is Alexis Banks. I'm a senior program and communications manager at Root Change based in Washington, D.C. We are a small but mighty organization that helps partners like the Siegel Family Foundation better understand the ecosystems in which they work in order to strengthen their programming and their engagement with those ecosystems. So I've been with Root Change for 4 years. And as Sotin mentioned, for the past 2 years, we've been partnering with the Social Impact Incubator, first in Malawi and now also in Rwanda, to map the social impact ecosystems. And so my work is often focused on equipping teams like the Siegel Family Foundation with the knowledge and skills and tools they need to understand how to use things like network maps, to understand the ecosystem, who are the organizations and actors in those ecosystems, what are the gaps or opportunities for strengthening the work within that ecosystem. And we also use feedback as another mechanism for understanding the experience of organizations like social enterprises or nonprofits. What is their experience engaging with a service like the Social Impact Incubator or the broader ecosystem? Do they have the information and resources they need to be successful? So really looking forward to this conversation today. And my favorite animal is an elephant. Both, I just love how beautiful and majestic they are in the wild, but also more recently, I have a 11-month-old daughter, and she has a dancing elephant that she really loves to play with, and that's really sweet. So excited to hear what your favorite animal is, Sotin.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Well, my favorite animal is an eagle. I recently traveled to the beach of Malawi, and we saw an eagle who the fishermen were able to call and give fish. I think it just amazed me how we can really connect with these animals and really learn from them and their tactics and everything else. So that's how it captured me a lot. Yeah. To continue the conversation, I thank you all for joining us, and we really are hoping to hear your experience in various aspects. Our viewers that are joining in, we are discussing, we are here for a webinar dissecting the social ecosystem, the social impact ecosystem in Malawi, using the power of network mapping. Just to give you 3 things to look out for during this discussion. We'll talk about, we explore 2 network mapping tools as examples of network mapping. And with those, in that conversation, we'll see how they have influenced sector decision, growth, learning, collaboration, as well as social capital management. And then the conversation will touch upon really the value. What is the overall value of network mapping in this highly fragmented social impact space? So, and how different players need to use such tools. So the question you should be looking out for is, are you someone who can use these tools that these people are talking about and the examples they're giving? Does it apply to you as a user? Does it apply to you as a decision maker? We'll also really closely look at the network mapping benefits and advantages and the technology aspect of it, all of which will really tie in the discussion. After all the discussions, we welcome chatter in the comment box. We encourage you to put in questions, comments, and our team will constantly look at that. So be happy, enjoy this. It's a conversation. We are all learning from each other, and we look forward to having fun. But already someone has texted me. I came onto this webinar. I don't really know what network mapping is. So to open up, I'm inviting Alexis just to give us an overview what network mapping is all about. Why is it important? Why should we even be using this? Why should we be talking about this?
Sure, thanks, Sotin. And I see you put up an image of the Malawi Social Impact Map. This is on a platform called Pando that is administered by Root Change. And so just taking a look at this this map that you're seeing here, each of these dots represents an individual organization within the Malawi social impact ecosystem. And the lines between them represent their relationships. So although a network map sounds complicated, it's really just a visual representation of the organizations and their relationships within the social impact ecosystem in Malawi. So we have been using network maps for the past decade to understand how individuals, organizations, and institutions work together to achieve a common goal. So we use network maps before, during, and after an initiative to understand the ecosystem, and as I mentioned before, to identify opportunities to strengthen the ecosystem and track ways that that system is growing and evolving over time. So for example, when we started out working with SFF, this map was much smaller, but over time, as more people have input the relationships and the actors that they're connected to within the ecosystem, it has grown to provide us with a more accurate picture of what this ecosystem really looks like. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the example of the Malawi social impact map, and then also some other scenarios where we've used network mapping to facilitate programming. So in this context, for the Malawi social impact map, the way that this map was created is we asked the social impact incubator champions and alumni, who do you go to in Malawi for information, resources, or support related to topics like capacity strengthening or strategy development? Who do you go to for funding to support your social enterprise, for example? And as organizations shared that information with us, a network map was automatically generated on the Pando platform so that we can see who different organizations are going to for resources and information. And as the map is created, this really reveals to us information about the ecosystem. So for example, we can see there's a lot of activity taking place in the topic of funding. A lot of outreach is being done to support funding, but we can also, we've also seen that there are not a lot of shared connections to funders. So there's a lot of one-off individual connections to individual funders, and perhaps there might be an opportunity to foster increased connections, to broker connections on behalf of one another to funding opportunities. We've also seen, on the other hand, that there's not a lot of activity in the topic of strategy development. And so that's something that we've talked with the Siegel Family Foundation team to better understand why is that? Is this an area where we might want to explore further or invest further? So the map gives us some insights about how to engage with the ecosystem. It helps organizations like the Siegel Family Foundation think about ways to strengthen their programming. It also gives us some questions and discussion topics to explore further with the members of that ecosystem, so the organizations that have input their relationships. And I know I'm talking a lot, but I'll just wrap up by also sharing, we've used this approach throughout the African continent and in a lot of different scenarios. So for example, we've also used network mapping in Kenya to understand how cooperatives are working together to strengthen their work and increase their revenue for their members. So how they're connected to different services provided by the government or by other service delivery organizations. We've also looked at youth work readiness in Kisumu County in Kenya to understand what services are available to organizations that are trying to help youth find work opportunities. And we've also used network mapping at a more international level. So for those that might be familiar with the Shift the Power movement, we've used network mapping to understand what different organizations are working on this topic in different countries around the world. How are they connecting with one another? And how could the movement come together to be even more effective to achieve their advocacy goals? So that was a lot of information. Maybe I'll pause there to see if you have any other questions for me, Soteen, or maybe you want to pass it on to another panelist to share more.
Thank you, Alexis. That's a very in-depth outlook of what network mapping is. I know a lot of participants. If you still have questions of what DD network mapping is, please type in. But what I'm hearing here from Alexis is that this is a tool that is consolidating relationship management in various communities. We're looking at engagement and strengthening collaboration. Others are using it to track particular activities that are happening in a particular community, for example, cooperatives and their impact. I think that's an interesting tool as network mapping as a whole to use in this social impact sector. Later on, I'll call upon deeper discussion just to follow up really the questions that people want to know. Why is it them now? Why are the users important? Why are the donors important to be seeing such a tool? So I'll come back to you. But at this juncture, let me invite Godfrey, who is using a slightly different tool that is also talking about network mapping. What is network mapping to you, Godfrey, and what are your examples?
Yeah, thank you, Sotin. I think you can hear me. All right, thank you so much. As for me, mostly I'm using a CUM mapping tool. Yeah, so a CUM mapping tool is an online mapping tool used to visualize different stakeholder connections, which explores the complex web of loyalties, interests, influence, and alignment of key players. So CUM mostly or basically answers the 5 main questions, like who is doing what, and where, and how, with whom, and for whom. So before coming up with the online mapping tool, we do area stakeholder panel paper-based mapping, whereby some of these sophisticated machines are not user-friendly. So we first do sensitization meetings, whereby we sensitize people on how mapping is done and benefits and the gaps where all the extension service providers are implementing and implementing partners are made available. So when we have done that, we do the data is done at area stakeholder a global extension platform at the community level, whereby we collect the data of a stakeholder, all the stakeholders which are in operation in that particular area, using flip charts, pentomarkers, strings of different colors to show. Having done that, we do discussions about the flip charts, which are organized into a circle, so that we can all see. We guide the group through the process of using strings to identify connections between the similar who's, what's, where, and how, then to develop a web. So having done those discussions, we enter the collected data online. So the collected data is, we enter the collected data via Excel sheet, or we can do it directly. Having done that, we import the Excel sheet into online map, where we also decorate to show how stakeholders are connected. Then we can discuss and use for coordination and collaboration. So as you can see, the far right here, this is how the CUM map looks like when it has been imported into online map.
Thank you so much, Godfrey.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting. What I'm seeing from the different perspective, Kumu is consolidating community, direct organization to community relationships and influence. And also you have touched upon how you're really taking these on particular topics such as accountability, availability of services, and who the services are devised from. And you have also touched upon how different organizations can really compare notes on what they're doing indirectly. So whereas Pando has really touched upon on business to business, organization to organization relationships, focusing on really how they actually build on that. As I'm looking at the chart, I would invite Maria maybe to give a reaction also in relation to how they are using Pando. What is your initial reaction, Maria, on this two perspectives?
Maria, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. I think there are various ways in which network maps can be used to understand various ecosystems, specifically the areas around which actors are collaborating, where resources are, where there are gaps, where there are opportunities. But I think what's critical is really how we take that data and use it to support the ecosystem to be more effective in the impact that it's having within the spaces that it's operating. And what we see from our experience just coming through to the social impact incubator specifically, and how we kind of got on the journey of getting into network mapping is one of the pillars of the support that we provide to social impact actors within the social impact incubator is providing the connections. And so when we got in our cohorts, when we first launched in 2016, growing, what we would do is look at where there's areas of potential collaboration, where there's symbiosis, how we would then functionally make those connections organization to organization directly. But as the community grew, we realized that there were a lot of other actors outside of our core functional community that were participating in this ecosystem that we didn't have visibility of. The second thing that we also realized is that when we were not making these functional curated connections, there was really no way or no space for actors themselves to identify other actors that they could potentially connect with on various aspects, be it strategy development, be it raising of funds, be it sharing of skills or experience, etc. That visibility wasn't there. And so we thought about how do we use a tool that can make this data visible to us as the stakeholder in the ecosystem to support the decisions that we make but also how can we create that platform for other actors to be able to identify who's in my ecosystem, where can I get specific resources, who's involved in particular work, and how can we create some convergence within the system where we now begin to share resources, when we now begin to share expertise as well, and be able to see also where is there repetition within the ecosystem, where is there overkill, and where are there gaps where resources need to be redirected or activity needs to be redirected in certain spaces where there's maybe oversubscription in other spaces. So we really needed a solid tool that would give us that visibility of the ecosystem so that as an influencer, we understand how do we direct our resources strategically for the system? Where are the specific high-touch interaction touch points? Where are the resource hubs? Who are people going to in the ecosystem for specific things? And how can we support those actors to become more conscious and more intentional about the support and the resources that they're providing to the ecosystem? And what we found interesting was that there were some actors that were resource hubs within the ecosystem that weren't consciously aware that that's what they were doing. And so when they became aware that actually we have a lot of people coming to us for this particular thing, actually a lot of our interactions and connections are based on these particular type of expertise, then those actors in the ecosystem became more proactive about, first of all, making themselves available and visible within the ecosystem for those particular resources or expertise, and making themselves available within the ecosystem, but also really being intentional about how do we cultivate this resource or this expertise in a way that not only benefits us, but that in a way that we can spread it out and across the ecosystem so that the entire ecosystem benefits. So really for us, it grew from how do we go beyond just curating relationships in our closed community where resources and connections can bring together greater impact, but really step back as an influencer and say, what does the ecosystem look like? Who are the actors? Where are the key touch points? Where are the gaps? And how can we direct resources, expertise, and how can we influence the ecosystem in a way that cultivates positive growth within the ecosystem and amplifies the impact of the individual actors within that ecosystem? So that's really where we were coming from. And Pando as a tool has really helped us to have visibility of what those interaction touch points are, where the resources are, but also more importantly, the role that we as a social impact incubator and Single Family Foundation can play in positively influencing the ecosystem, directing resources within the ecosystem in ways that make sense, not just for the actors that we engage with, our partners, but for the wider ecosystem.
Oh, yeah, so getting perspective from both Maria and Godfrey as well as Alexis, what I'm hearing is that these tools are used by big organizations to study what is happening in the ecosystem and have impact. In case of Maria, you have described your organization as an influencer and is having I would say a firefly view on that ecosystem. How does the beneficiaries, the people who are on the map as users, the other people that are not influencers, the other people that are not international organizations, really benefit from usage of such a map, such a platform? What does it mean to them?
Oh, is technology playing tricks on me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, but we can't see you now. Yeah.
Okay, right. I'm back. Sorry. I think that what we're seeing is, as we've engaged in feedback sessions with the users on the user side, there's been a couple of things that have come through. First of all, it's the ability to recognize who else is in the ecosystem with me. So when we look at the map, when users go on the map, they're able to see themselves and how they're positioned within the ecosystem, and look at the extended connections beyond their direct connections. Who are the other extended connections within their same value chain or within their sector, and then be able to identify intentionally where they need to be building bridges. So who do I need to be speaking to? Who do I need to be engaging with within my ecosystem that's doing either similar work or that's involved in my sector or that's doing complementary work that I can connect with and be able to either get support, provide support, or in a way build some types of collaborations with. But also, who are the people that are interested in connecting with me? And on what specific interaction touch points are they interacting with me? So is there a particular expertise or resource that a lot of other actors are coming to me for? And if that is the case, how can I be intentional about being able to have that accessible to others in a way that's also beneficial to the type of work that I'm doing? How can we avoid maybe replication sometimes, where that can be there can be collaborations that ensure that we don't have replication in the same areas of the same work and so forth and so on. So really actors are able to see themselves in the context of the ecosystem. Because I know when you're running a social enterprise, you're running a grassroots organization, you're really busy with the community that you're working with. You're not really thinking about yourself in the context of the wider system. But what the map does is provide you with a visual that shows you where you are within the broader system. And that allows, I think, individual social actors, the smaller organizations to really see where they fit into the big picture and how they can map their own growth, and how they can assess their own strengths within the ecosystem and really sort of decide how they can benefit the wider ecosystem. So really getting people to think, getting organizations and social actors and social entrepreneurs to think of themselves and their organization as complementary to others within the value chain that they're operating in, within the sector that they're operating in. And I think without a tool to really make you see where you're sitting in that space, it's something that's really difficult as an individual organization to do. So I think there's value in that. And it's also really about then finding the different, being able to more easily find the different connections within the ecosystem and to leverage that in ways that work. It's also an opportunity for dialogue. And I think that when we've had some of our own feedback sessions with the actors in the ecosystem, we've had some very sobering, feedback around, for example, how as actors within philanthropy and donors, etc., how we think about directing resources to community, how we structure investments in ways that maybe by their design, the ecosystem, rather than to bring the ecosystem together. So when we begin to have those conversations, then it helps to benefit all the actors and all the stakeholders within the ecosystem to really think about how do we develop the strengths within the ecosystem, how do we bolster the resources that are already there, how do we redirect resources in the future, and how do we intentionally start being really intentional about how we work together and how we respond. And particularly at this time where we're facing this global crisis of COVID, it's become more imperative that we are intentional and coordinated more at the grassroots level in terms of how we respond and how we coordinate with each other to be able to respond. So if I'm involved in education, I can't just respond about education within the COVID context and so forth and so on.
Yeah, so Maria, thank you for that thorough explanation on how you are viewing now the user, other than just the big organizations that are bringing these tools and inviting people to come in. Now we have really had that, we thank you for giving us that context of the user as individual organizations, small organizations, SMEs, and also service providers and others that are on these platforms. Now maybe I'll dig deeper with this question. Maybe Godfrey, could you give us a bit more context in how others, in terms of, in the same question, in the same line of thinking, that you are an implementer who is bringing this service, and now what about the people that are in the community? How does this really matter to them? How do they really, how does it really matter to them, and how can they really use as communities, individual communities that you're working with? How do they really use these platforms, and how does it really matter? Is it something for you, or is it something for them? And as we are reflecting on that question, there's a chatter in the inbox. How does the private sector fit into such tools? How does the government fit into such tools? So yeah, I would put Alexis on standby while Godfrey is telling us more about the community aspect of it. Thank you. Godfrey, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sotin. As the Kumu is not mainly for as the implementers, this it goes to both the implementers as well as the beneficiaries, like the communities. Since we have we used Kumu, we communities have come to an aware that they have reviewed that some of the projects that are registered at a district level, they are just appearing on the paper, but they are not on the ground. So using KUM, they have helped the communities to at least to find out that some of the organizations, they are not typical on the ground implementing the activities. So they are able to track the organization or the project which are taking place in their area. And also, it's also being used as a record keeping tool, because they are able to document the organizations or the projects which are being implemented in their area. And also, CUM has also reviewed that some of the areas are overwhelmed with a lot of projects or interventions, whilst the the other areas, they are deficient of the same interventions. And also, they have seen the CUM to be very much important because it enhances accountability as well as transparency in terms of the implementation of the activities by the implementers and as well as the community members themselves. So participatory mapping helps to identify these issues as well as to address these issues by building mutual relationships and the trust among the available community development committees. In the end, we experience sustainability of some projects because the communities, they honor the interventions or the projects that are coming in their respective areas.
Thank you, Godfrey. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you for that perspective. We as participants, now that's interesting. We both participants are people who are implementing projects in particular communities, and also we have participants who are mostly managing particular communities or implementing particular projects. Now I'll shift back to a final reaction on this question to Alexis, just how the private sector and how do they really fit in? There's a question on the chat. How does the private sector fit into such tools, keeping in mind that some private companies are very reluctant on sharing network data? So this question has triggered a data protection discussion, has triggered something that you may need to maybe have a view on. Alexis.
Sure. That's a great question. And actually, I don't think it's exclusive to the private sector or government. We encounter from all different sectors questions about data security and also reluctance to share network data. But I love so much of what Maria and Godfrey have shared. And I'm also loving this conversation that's unfolding in the chat box about the fact that it's really not about the tool itself. It's about the discussion that results from the map. And so I have a few thoughts to share. First, absolutely the purpose here, as Godfrey mentioned, is to build trust and to strengthen relationships within the ecosystem so that the actors in this ecosystem are able to work together more effectively to achieve shared goals and outcomes. So Maria was mentioning, for example, identifying ways and spaces to reallocate resources, to avoid the duplication of efforts, to identify opportunities for collaboration and to strengthen one another's work, and to even look and see, okay, I can see that this organization is already addressing this need in this community over here, but there's a gap over here where this need isn't being filled, and we have the expertise and resources to do that. So let's shift our focus to achieve that goal over here. But really, in order to make all of that happen, both to invite people to input their data, but also to have those really important conversations as a result of the data that we see, we have to build buy-in for the process. And I think Maria did a great job of describing some ways that your team has already begun to do that. So having one-on-one conversations with the actors in the ecosystem, reaching out and talking through the purpose of the network mapping process, but also what you're already seeing in the network map and beginning to surface insights that are relevant and useful for that particular organization. And so often I find that's when people get really excited, when they can see, wow, I'd really like to connect with this organization that I didn't even know existed, that's has a particular expertise, or that others are going to as a resource on a topic that I'm interested in. And so building that buy-in is when people start to feel a little bit more comfortable in putting their own relationship and organization data. And I think one of the things that's really cool about both the Pando platform, and it sounds like from Godfrey's experience, maybe the network map he's built as well, is that there's equal access to the data. So everyone has the same information and is able to draw out insights from the map, apply it to their own work, their own experience, see it through their own lens. And so really in terms of bringing in the private sector or bringing in government, it's having those one-on-one conversations or small group discussions to hear, how could this be useful for you? Or how have other organizations like yours used this tool? And so for organizations that are hesitant, we often find that showing them the data that's already in the platform and making sense of the network map gets them excited. And in a lot of cases, they've already been identified by other organizations in the ecosystem, and they're realizing we're missing from this map. We aren't as visible as we want to be, but we are playing an active role in the ecosystem. So we have an incentive to join and participate so others can see the role that we're playing in the ecosystem.
Thank you, Alexis, for that perspective. I know for sure, a lot of us players in the social impact incubator and other platforms, as startup organizations, institutions, international NGOs, we have multiple and diverse things and tools we're using. We're in a lot of databases. Recently, we have seen in Malawi, a platform, my NGO, has been launched where each organization is registering and submitting reports to a government mandated institution just to follow up their work, a form of network mapping in itself. Now, because you're already speaking, Alexis, I just want to tap your information, your knowledge, as someone who has been working in that technology sector for operating a tool. What is really the future of network mapping and the technology behind it all? What is this and its current positioning on digital data platforms amidst the pandemic? While you're answering that, I would welcome in the chatter. Do you feel like you understand what network mapping is? Feel free to drop in comments. Do you feel like, okay, now I know what it is? Just throw in the comments. While we hear from Alexis, what is the future of network mapping? Yes, we have seen things going digital. We have seen, but now just give us the context, the positioning of data platforms amidst the pandemic, and how should we be alert? How should we really, be alert as one, beneficiaries, we can be communities that are on the core. Secondly, as leaders in our startups and our small organizations, as international organizations, as private sector, or as government, what will it mean in the long term?
Sure, thanks, Sotin. Really good question. I think there are a lot of dynamics at play here that are resulting in an increased interest in network mapping, and also just an evolution of how network mapping is carried out. So I realized I didn't answer one of your earlier questions, which was about data security. And of course, that's on everyone's minds, and it is something that we're continuing to navigate. So for example, our team spent a lot of time really understanding the GDPR compliance requirements that were coming out of the European Union, for example, because we work with global networks. And so we're likely to have users from all over the world on our platform. So we need to be conscious of what are the security concerns and requirements for everyone in their different contexts. And so just to address that question that came up earlier, we do spend a lot of time thinking about people's data security while also wanting to make sure that everyone has equal access to the information. It's really critical to us that this is not an extractive exercise, that we aren't simply going into a system and extracting information to make decisions ourselves as Root Change or as the Siegel Family Foundation, for example. We want this to be a shared resource so everyone is able to make decisions about their work using the information in the network map. But we also want people to feel really safe and secure sharing that data. So right now, for example, it is what we call a closed network. Only people who have an account and a password and that have been invited in by someone else in the ecosystem are able to join and participate in the process. And that's one way that we're trying to protect the security of everyone's information. And of course, people also have the option to opt in to share their contact information, their name, for example, because we want to be respectful of people's privacy. And that's just one thing that's changing over time that we're continuing to navigate. As I mentioned before, there is definitely an increased interest in network mapping. And in a lot of the contexts where we're working, we're seeing other network maps pop up, and we're looking for ways to combine forces really and share those resources and information so that one, people aren't duplicating efforts, they're not constantly inputting their data into different sources, but also so that we can really create the most accurate possible picture of what's going on in a particular system to best inform our conversations and decision making. So there's an increased interest, and I think that's because there's also an increasing understanding that no single organization is going to achieve sustainable, lasting impact on their own. We need to work together. We need to collaborate, whether kind of regardless of the sector that you're working in, the type of work that you do, you're going to be dependent on others for services, resources, and information. And so as that understanding continues to increase, there's a demand to understand, okay, so what does my ecosystem look like? What other organizations are out there that I should be connecting with? And that is the case for people who are thinking about their work long-term. It's also the case for people who are thinking about maybe shorter-term initiatives or programs. They want to make sure that before they begin doing any sort of work, they first have a really solid understanding of who else is doing this type of work. How do we avoid duplicating efforts, and how can we work together? So those are just some of the trends that we're seeing. And of course, I'm actually just looking back to see if I had anything else I wanted to mention here. No, I think that's really where just an increased interest and a continued evolution of the technologies that we're using to do this work too.
All right, thank you, Alexis. You have touched upon some interesting discussion regarding really how can we really combine such forces, people using different platforms, different technologies, and how we can really consolidate as a unit. Some of the gaps in the social impact sector in Africa are that we are disjointed. Everyone is starting something. So we are looking at an ecosystem that is young and coming up as grown. So to Maria, as we jump towards really deepening the value of what is the really output value, and what is the way forward? What is the way forward for mapping? I want you, before you touch the way forward and value mapping, Maria, I want to ask a question. Is network mapping itself really going to exacerbate defragmentation? We see everyone is making a choice based on what they need. Is it something that will bring more chaos in the ecosystem or bring us together? Now, looking in the future.
Wow, that's quite a mouthful. But I will say this. I think that what you don't have visibility of or what you don't measure, you really can't manage. So I think that having the tools to be able to mine the data and be able to look objectively at what the ecosystem looks like is really powerful, particularly for the influencers of the ecosystem and the people that hold power within the ecosystem. Because what that allows us to do is to then be able to make informed decisions about how we engage with the system in terms of expertise, in terms of resources, in terms of also really positioning our roles as various stakeholders within those ecosystems and judging the health of our role as well. I think that for most power influencers, one of the things that always has to be in your consciousness is do no harm. So in the process of engaging with that ecosystem, in the process of supporting, in the process of providing resources and so forth, how can we engage in ways that help to create a healthy, fertile ecosystem, and really also, be honest about what some of the existing structures in the ecosystem have done by way of easily or unconsciously fragmenting the ecosystem. So I think that having that data is important because it helps to drive decision making, it helps to drive resources. But of course, the quality of the data, it's not just about having the data, but it's also about building the trust. It's about the feedback loops and having really qualitatively assess, rise and fall on the quality of the dialogue and feedback loops and the trust that the data then allows us to start building. So that's really, really critical. So the way forward for me is let's continue to try and to dissect and have a look at what do our ecosystems look like? What strengths do we have? What expertise, what resources do we already have that we can build on? What are the gaps that then can be invested in and can be, what gaps can be closed? And then how can we build efficiencies in terms of how we coordinate and collaborate and work together? And I think that's becoming more and more important as we deal with crises, as we're dealing with COVID now, and all the other things that we have to deal with that we don't expect. How do we make it more efficient so that as we invest into social development, we're also doing it in ways that are more agile, ways that are more responsive to community, and ways that are building sustainable systems as we go along the way. So understanding ourselves, understanding the context within which we exist and operate within our ecosystem, and then bringing that back to how does that make us more functionally efficient and more responsive to community and more sustainable in the long term. I think those are really key critical pillars that will really bring the value and drive the value of network mapping, because data in itself by itself is really just lots of numbers. But what we do with it and how we use that to engage, I think is the difference maker. And that for me is key.
Thank you, Maria, for that deep understanding on the way forward. For Godfrey, what next? What next? You have that Kumu and community initiative market mapping that is in the community. What next? In closing, just tell us what's going on next, and what value, what are key things that someone who has their own organization, maybe in Balaka or in other areas, really take away from you and say, okay, this is it, and this is how we can or follow up on such tools on your end. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sotin. As for Balaka, we have taken Kumu as to be one of our the most important tool to be used for in order to enhance coordination as well as collaboration among the implementing partners as well as the communities. So what we have done, we have negotiated with the Balaka District Council, so that the Balaka District Council has integrated the Kumu mapping into their action plan, whereby whosoever is coming with a project in the district can pass through one of these DICE Agriculture Extension Platform, which is the District Agriculture Coordinating Committee. It's so doing, it shows like the program. So it means that whosoever is coming to do business or operate in Balaka, definitely he has to go through it. And also, as earlier on said, I said Kum is also some sort of like an inventory of stakeholders. So it's easy it's a thing that everyone has to honor, because it will be easy to track who is where and doing what with whom. So as everyone here in Barak has embarked on into KUM as to be the most important tool, and we have that's what is being used. Thank you so much. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Godfrey, for your reflections. And we are reaching part of the end of the webinar. And before I invite any other panelists for final comments, I would like to announce that Kumu and Pando are all platforms that are there for those that are really interested to dig deep in the conversation and have a simulation. Firstly, we'll send you tools, we'll send you also videos to demonstrate how it works and how you can use these different platforms. Also feel free to really just send questions. I'll give 5 minutes just to handle questions in the chat. I'll be able to read them out. But while I'm compiling these questions, I would invite any panelist to have final remarks, and then we'll take a few questions and then close off this webinar in the 5 minutes. Open to any panelist who has final thoughts. So community, keep on sending the questions, any clarifications, any points you wanted to.
There also
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so as basically KUM enhances coordination, collaboration, as well as co-location of service providers. So in so doing, like, we avoid duplications of efforts among the implementing partners, because as earlier on said, that KUM has reviewed that most of the projects or organizational projects, they are being centered in one area, whereby if such cases are happening now and again, it means there will be a duplication of efforts, and also the conflict of interest on the targeted beneficiary. So KUM, it's there to ensure that there is an even distribution of the projects, as well as the resources and the expertise. So it's a tool that everyone has to honor it for good implementation, and as well as to assist the communities to develop economically, socially, as well as physically. So thank you very much. I just wanted to add that.
All right, thank you so much. I see that panelists do not have, Maria is showing signs of saying her final remarks. I keep an eye on.
I think for me, ultimately, it's the tools are really helpful. The data really helps to direct what we do in the ecosystem, but ultimately it's about relationships. It's about building trust and creating a cohesive response mechanism to the interventions that we need for social impact. And so really for me, it rises and falls on the relationships and the feedback loops. And I think that for us, as we implement Pando, is going to be the difference maker, is that it's about relationships, it's about building trust, it's about the feedback loops and creating the dialogue that really brings that data to life. So if anyone is embarking on implementing a mapping tool or participating in an existing platform where they're mapping, I think the key thing is, how are we then building the feedback loops so that we enhance those relationships and build the trust?
Thank you, Maria, for your final remarks. I see Alexis has our finals. Go ahead.
I just really want to echo what Maria shared. I absolutely agree. The purpose of generating these network maps is really to inform a conversation and to bring organizations together. So in a lot of cases, we're surfacing organizations or relationships that we didn't even know existed. We're bringing people into the conversation that weren't a part of that conversation before, because we didn't know that someone within our ecosystem was already connected to these other actors, for example. And so it really opens the door to the possibility for having conversations about how do we more effectively work together? Where would we like to see our system go in the future? And to Godfrey's point in the chat box, he had asked, what are the stimuli or what are the catalytic levers for ecosystem building that emerge from the network map? And that's really where we see things like gaps, where we don't see a lot of activity happening in a particular area, or where we see that that resources are limited in a particular space. And so that's where we can identify key places to strengthen the ecosystem, or connections that don't yet exist that we could help foster and make simply by making an introduction between two organizations, for example. So as Maria pointed out, it really is about what comes after the network map has been generated. The map itself is just a tool. It just gives us a visual representation of what's already happening in real life. But it then gives us this opportunity to have really important conversations in the future, either one-on-one or as a group of organizations, about what we want to do next now that we have this information. So really enjoyed this conversation today. Some really good questions in the chat box and conversations. Please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to continue it, or Godfrey, if you'd like to talk about ways that our work might overlap, for example. And
thank you, Alexis and all. To close this session, I'll just read one last comment from the group, and then my final reflections on the chat. Melula says, in these days of COVID-19 pandemic, where most funders are becoming challenged to do physical due diligence, these platforms will become quite crucial. They will easily go in there, navigate the ecosystem, and get to know who is already connected in various ways. So yeah, Mwelula is really speaking to the conversation about network mapping. Now, I think overall, to close the session, I would say that we have really covered what we planned in understanding what network mapping is. We are not, what the emphasis being that these are not good to have tools, nice to show that you're affiliated to something, but rather outputs. The outputs are going beyond really understanding what the ecosystem is all about, where you stand, and also what sort of impact you have on the ground, what sort of accountability mechanisms. We have seen expertise sharing. We have seen the value in also assessing yourselves as funders, whether you have come into the ecosystem and done duplication or worked with the very same people, or whether you are coming into the ecosystem to see which areas are really lacking attention. And we've also seen that the biggest thing about network mapping is the trust and cohesiveness of the whole system. At this point, I really would like to thank all the panelists for really sharing their in-depth experience. It was good to have you. And I look forward to have more in-depth collaboration and more in-depth chats in the future. Maybe you will show us beyond the maps, and we really have really more conversation, more people coming in. And finally, I urge you all to look forward to some of the tools that we have. We'll share a presentation. We'll be able also to share some of the videos. For example, this webinar, if some of the colleagues missed it, we'll be able to share it with you. And finally, we'll be able to share some simulation tools through the email you subscribe. Thank you all for staying on the call up to the end. This is the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you for a great session, everyone. Good to be with you.
Thank you, everyone.